Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Breckland Planning for today. We have already started live streaming, but we are completely bogged down with paperwork at the moment, or at least I am. I can't even see the colour of the desk. Okay, if we could first of all cover off what we class as our general housekeeping. First of all, fire exits. Now, the two fire exits in this room are quite clearly marked, the two doors here. There is another one down the end of the corridor where the lavatories are, and of course the entrance door where you came in. We have no tests down for today, so if we hear the alarm, we will definitely treat it as genuine, and we will vacate and meet together in the car park. If you're worried about anything happen at the time and you're not sure where you're going, just follow all this lot, because they will be out of there fairly swiftly. They won't try to save the building, because I know what they're like. But so that gives you some form of direction. Could I also ask, which is why I say that, because I've been rushing around and I haven't done mine, could you please switch your mobile phones or various devices to silent if you decide that it's more important that your phone rings and you can deal with all your various business acumens, or answering phone calls from your partner about picking up fruit and veg on the way home, and your phone disturbs my meeting, it's a £10 fine to the chairman's charity. Now, it's not me as chairman of this committee, it's the chairman of the council, who is actually my vice chairman here, and his chosen charities of where your £10 will be very welcome. He will tell you, because I can never remember, because they're tongue twisters. Go for it, Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, it's the Swafferman Litcham Home Hospice and the Sands Baby Bereavement Society. And with experience as well, I can tell you many Breckland residents have been referred to both organisations this last 12 months or so. So they're very important to help with the well-being and welfare of our community.
Thank you very much. So there you go. That's where your money will go. Our next item, procedure. What will happen is, as we go through the agenda, the item will be called. I've got a list of people who have registered to speak. I will ask you to come and sit on the right-hand side. There are spaces there for you. The officer will give the presentation, and then I will instruct you as to when you can speak, and when your time is up that you've been allocated, you will hear the bell, which doesn't mean your room is ready. It means shut up, because we've had enough. When you hear that bell, do not stop in sentence and finish, okay? And then we can move on and we can get done and organised. Introductions for the day. Well, the three wise monkeys at the far end, which they're not ears and what have you at the moment, are from our lead local flood authority, who are here for one of our items, in fact our first item. So I'm not going to introduce them. What? Oh, you can, sir, yeah. Tell them who you are.
I'm Mark Ogden. I'm Flood and Water Manager at Norfolk County Council.
Morning everyone, Dean Shelton, Senior Flood Risk Officer at Norfolk County Council.
And Lewis Chappell, I'm a Flood Risk Officer at Norfolk County Council. There
we go. Well done, that saved me a job. On my left-hand side, I have Mike Horn, who is a solicitor to the council. My right-hand person in this day and age is Rebecca Collins, who makes sure that I say everything correctly, and if I don't, I get a kick in the shins. We have Simon Wood, who's the head honcho of the planning. And at the back, two of our officers today, we've got Barbara Greengrass. Barbara, stand up, because you're so small they can't see you. Thank you. Sit down. And we also have Matthew Blackie. Stand up, Matthew. They won't see you either. Stand up. Be done. Everyone's seen you now. I also have at the back, we have we have a Becky, not a Rebecca, who's my usher for today, who you've all seen as you've entered the building. And last but not least, the lovely Julie, who is here from Democratic Services to make sure that everything's kept in order. Okay, that's enough of that. We will start on agenda. First of all, I have the minutes from the meeting held last time, which was last year, which was December's meeting. Do I have your authority members to sign this off as read? Thank you very much. Okay. That's that done, Julie. That's for your files. Thank you. Okay. Item 2, please, Julie. Apologies and substitutes.
Or will it not work?
Do you want?
No, don't take that one. That's the presentation one. Do you want me to get you on from the end?
Sorry about that, Chairman. We have apologies from Councillor Harvey and Councillor Taylor, and in attendance for Councillor Taylor as her substitute is Councillor Samantha Taylor.
Okay, that's a lot of Taylors. Taylor, not here, but Taylor's in the place. Right, okay, we got it. We know where we are. Item 3 is declaration and representations received. I will take them as each item is raised. Number 4, Chairman's announcements. I'm not going to tell you how many sleeps it is to Christmas. No, not going to do it. I'm going to give you a couple of months to get bedded into this new year, but I hope you all had a nice Christmas. I know I did. And just want to do a request. We are in need of a member for the Chairman's panel for March and another member for April, or the same member. Councillor Kittle-Morris, which would you like to do, or would you like to do both? You can do both. Okay, make a note of that. Becky's happy. So that's fine. I think that's me covered off on that. So now I go to Rebecca here. Item 6, urgent business. You haven't got anything?
You missed a
Oh,
request.
sorry, request to defer.
None of them either.
And then none of them either. Okay, item 7, local plan update. Over to you, please, Simon.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a few points to update on. As members will be aware, there is currently a local plan consultation under Regulation 18 in process with an end date of the 19th of February. Covers a couple of main areas: alternative development scenarios and a settlement boundaries paper. It also includes the evidence base for the call for sites, a topic paper on local service centres, and also one on villages with boundaries. So I would encourage all members to look at those and respond accordingly, and encourage their parish and town councils to do so as well. Members may be aware that the referendum for the Watton Neighbourhood Plan was held last Thursday, and there was about 1,050 people voted, which I think is not a bad turnout, and it was 90% roughly in favour and the remaining against. So that will come at some stage to be formally adopted. An update on the Necton Neighbourhood Plan. We have just appointed an inspector to carry out an examination into that plan, which I anticipate will be done in the next sort of 2 to 3 months. So we will keep members updated on that. And also, just in case members weren't aware, we have appointed a new policy manager to the team, and she will start on the 26th of February, and we will introduce you to her in due course. Thank you.
It's open to questions. Councillor Attwell, then Councillor Kittle-Morris.
2 questions if I can, Chairman, because I want to bring in nutrient neutrality first, if I can, Simon, if you wouldn't mind. There was an article in today's press online about the plight of a local small builder who's at his wit's end. He's having to sell his house. He bought some parcels of land to build on, and he's frustrated that apparently the scheme that's been set up amongst all the district planning authorities is prioritising large builders first and not on a first come, first served basis. Can you comment on that, and what assurance can we give small builders that we're doing everything humanly possible to free up their ability to build on the land that they've already bought? That's my first question. Do you want me to do the second one as well, or do you want me to answer that first?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Attwell. The scheme that's in place at the moment is focused on the catchment. So if development sites fall outside the catchment, then they won't be able to take advantage of that. We are working with Norfolk Environmental Credits and with other bodies to seek to bring forward mitigation within the Wensum catchment at the earliest opportunity. You will probably be aware that funding of £9.6 million has been provided by DLUC and DEFRA to enable nutrient mitigation to be brought forward, and we're looking at working with partners to utilise that money and bring schemes forward. In respect to the specific question that you had, the scheme that's in place at the moment is in the catchment, and the first tranche of credits are going to go to large builders. That was a decision reached by the board of the Norfolk Environmental Credits joint venture, but the monies that come from that will be recycled, and there will be credits available for small builders in the catchment through the second tranche. If the developer falls and the builder is within the catchment, then I would advise him to contact Norfolk Environmental Credits directly through their website. If it's within Breckland, and I don't know of whom you speak, but if they're in Breckland, then if they contact us as well, we will speak to Norfolk Environmental Credits as well to try and help them through. But unfortunately, they're not alone. We're starting to see the implications of this policy now in terms of lack of delivery of houses and implications for small and medium-sized builders, and also the supply chains beyond them. So I think we now have the funding in place that was released tail end of last year, early part of this, and hopefully those schemes will start coming forward at a more rapid pace now. The situation is not ideal, and I'm not sure I can offer a light right in front of us. It's still some way down the tunnel, I'm afraid.
Am I regularly updating the website with the details that they need to contact?
Yes, I think if anybody has any concerns, then our website is regularly updated to provide that information, and we will speak to anybody to try and help them.
Yeah, because the concern is that they can't hang on for the second tranche. You know, the larger builders probably got deeper pockets and they can bear that, but the smaller ones really are on a knife edge. The question I had regarding the local plan consultation is, could you just clarify the consultation around the specific sites? Because I've had parishes in my ward slightly confused about what it is exactly we're consulting on. My understanding was that we were going to consult on this particular pieces of land, and that was going to be done later in the spring as part of a further consultation. Are you consulting on the methodology of how those sites have been assessed, or are you consulting on their views on whether the piece of land in question should actually be developed or not in their village and their reasons why? Because that is causing some confusion. I did speak to Andy Darcy last week and asked him if he could clarify that for parishes in fairly quick order before we get near the end of the consultation. Thank you.
It's the form, it's the methodology. So what you have there is an example, or you have examples of the different sites have been assessed and how we've assessed them, and we are just consulting on the methodology. And I'll pick up with Andy and the interim manager to make sure that's clarified.
Thank you. Councillor Kittle-Morris, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just a quick question on biodiversity net gain, which I understand has been delayed again. And is going to be implemented sometime in February when secondary legislation goes through Parliament. Can you tell me and others who are watching and the audience how this will be implemented here in terms of when will the applications have to have that calculation for biodiversity net gain applied to them before they come before either this committee or officers for delegation?
So in terms of major planning applications, the requirement for biodiversity net gain as set out in the legislation kicks in from the 12th of February this year, and that's for applications that are submitted on or after that date. So if an application is currently going through the process, it won't have to have regard to that, even if it's determined after that date. In terms of minors and other applications that are appropriate, that will be at the beginning of April. We are currently working with other Norfolk districts and internally to get a system in place that will allow us to validate what is a fairly complex piece of legislation and complex levels of information to enable us to assess whether that information is correct and how we deliver that biodiversity net gain, whether it's on site or through credits. We're also working with external partners to understand the way in which they are going to deliver those credits and how we can tie developers into that. But it is still very much a work in progress at the moment, given the fact that the regulations and the legislation has been fairly slow in coming out, and to a degree contradicts itself in a couple of places as to when we need information, when we don't need information. Is it predetermination? Is it post-determination? So we're trying to work through those questions as well, and we could probably give you a bigger update maybe at the next committee.
Thank you. Any other members? No, that's fine. Thank you very much. Our next item is item 8, which are the deferred applications, which we have none on for today's meeting. So we go to item 9, and we are going to start with our 9A for today is at Swaffham, which is 3PL 2022-0412H, and speakers are Martin Cavalier, who's a supporter, Richard Padley, who's the applicant, Councillor Jacob Morton, who's the ward rep, and Councillor Judy Anscombe, who's ward rep on my committee, who's going to cross the floor. So if you'd like to make your way to the right-hand side, please, ladies and gentlemen, and then we'll be ready for our presentation. Okay. Over to you then, please, Rebecca.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So the item before you is at Swaffham, land off the A47, and it's a hybrid application for employment in this location off the industrial land in this location. And I'll go into that in a bit more detail during the application. So just for members... We're not moving, sorry. So just for members' benefit, apologies, and I will go back. Can you hear me twice?
Yes, I think your volume.
It's off. Yeah.
That should do it.
Can you hear me twice?
No.
Because once is enough, hey? Now I've lost my presentation. Sorry, members. try again. So just for members' information, a hybrid application is split into two elements. A full element, so you'll see the darker outline. So this is your full element of your planning permission. That full element comprises the construction of light industrial buildings, storage or trade counter uses, which fall within classes E, G, 1 and 2, Class B, 2 and Class B 8. So this is your full application. So you're considering full details on that half of the application site. On this half of the application site that is greyed out, this is effectively the outline application, so the outline part of the application site. You have to consider the application as a whole, so you're considering both the outline and the full element, but as hopefully you can see from this image that it's split into two parts. The outline planning permission is for the remainder of the site, and that's for a flexible employment use, and that is otherwise going to be known as Phase 2 as set out in your officer report. I will go back for your members just to show. This is the red outline of the application site. You can see Turbine Way Industrial Estate just to the south of the application site. You can see the A47 to the north of the application site running along that northern boundary. And also you can see on this plan Turbine Way, which is the principal access point to the site. And that's also set out in the allocation policy that we'll talk about in a bit more detail in a minute, but those are the key aspects of the site. And you can see the site is directly adjacent to the A47 on that southern boundary of the A47. Just for members' benefit, here's a wider aerial context of the site with the application site outlined in red for you, and you can see the employment site off Turbine Way just to the south there in a bit more detail. So here is the application plan submitted with the application site showing the site location plan. So I've set out where the full elements are and where the outline elements are. So you've got 12 units to that full element. And obviously we've got full plans showing the layout of the site, the car parking, the access and the turning arrangements. And obviously we've got full details of those buildings in terms of elevations to show the elements of that site. Obviously on the greyed out section, that is only indicative. So here is the Block A elevations. These are the elevations closest to the A47. So you can see they've got quite a simple form, continuous ridge and eaves height on the front elevation, and you can see on the rear elevation, so that stepped elevation, that would be the elevation adjacent to the A47. It's been stepped to break up the massing, and also the eaves height have been stepped, but the ridge height is continuous. That is to break up the massing and to allow some spaces for landscaping in between the buildings and the A47 as required by the allocation policy. Also, you can see that the building is quite simple form, continuous materials, consistent with what one would usually see on an employment site. Also, you can see on the front elevations, the site is largely inward facing, so you've got a central area of car parking in the central section of the site, and then you've got buildings to the north and south of the site that frame that area of car parking, turning and access through the application site. Those buildings you'll see on Block A, which is that northern block, and obviously I've got elevations of Block B and C. Those elevations are made up largely of a consistent regular form, broken up by panels of glazing and signage, again to reduce that massing and break up that frontage within that central section of the application site. Here are just the floor plans just to show that stepped element again of that northern block. And then Block C, B and C, those are the southern blocks to the application site, which, as you can see, mimic informal massing that of that northern block and use that glazing and signage element to break up the massing on that internal elevation while having fairly bland rear elevations consistent with the remainder of the employment site. And again, you can see Block B and C floor and roof plans. Just to caveat these members, we have had the application for a little bit of time. We have worked with the applicant, amended the designs and the proposals throughout the lifetime of the application. But we have still included these within the presentation. So these were the indicative plans showing the layout of the site that were submitted at the very first submission of the planning application, so you could get an idea of what the site would look like internally. These don't actually reflect the exact plans that you're considering at the moment, but it does give you an idea of what the applicant is trying to achieve in terms of materials and layout of the application site. So these are indicative impressions of what the site could look like. So moving on to the specifics of the planning application, members, as set out in your officer report, you can clearly see that there's been no public representations to the application. There are no objections from Swaffham Town Council, and there are no objections from the majority of the statutory consultees, apart from the lead local flood authority, who are here today to speak to you about the application if you've got any questions. So as from the officer report, members can clearly see that this is an allocated site. It was allocated in a previous development plan, but that policy has been saved for our current local plan. So the site is part of an allocated employment site. That allocation policy is set out in your officer report and is otherwise known as SW2. Policy SW2 had 3 points for its allocation. One was that access was provided from the Ecotech employment area. We otherwise know it as the Turbine Way employment area, or I certainly do. So the access was provided from that Turbine Way, and members, you can see from that earlier layout plan in this southern section and on the other layout, this is Turbine Way down here, this is the employment site, and this is the access point. So access is provided from the Ecotech Turbine Way employment area as per the allocation policy. And the second part of the allocation policy is that a landscape buffer is provided between the development and the A47 trunk road. So this is this land up to the northern section of the site. You'll note from the officer report that we've discussed that landscaping in some detail. You'll note from the officer report that there is some concerns raised that there is a limited space available for landscaping from this development site along that northern section of the site, and that the development of this site, otherwise being a green open site that you've seen in the aerial photography, will obviously change the character and appearance of the site in this location. However, the site is an allocated land for employment, and therefore that has been taken into account. So there was always an intention that the character of this land would change and be allocated for employment, and there would be built development in this location. And we've considered that built development in the context of what I showed you in the elevations and the layout of the site, and we consider that development to be acceptable. The applicant has also offered a landscaping proposal and a landscape management plan, and with discussions with the applicants and the tree officers, we've agreed to some heavy set planting along relevant sections of the site to be agreed by condition, which will effectively provide a landscape buffer in between the application site and the A47. And also the applicants have indicated that they're going to allow the hedgerow on that northern boundary to increase in height. And I've got an image for you. Sorry, I'm flicking about, members, but have got an image for you here to show that as that hedgerow and landscaping develops over time, is allowed to grow and mature, that will reach the eaves height of the building and provide that landscape buffer in accordance with the allocation policy, and to protect the wider character of the area and views from the A47. So on that basis, we are satisfied that this development is in accordance with that allocation policy. Obviously, overall, the MPPF and our local plan policies do support employment, unemployment sites, particularly those policies, those more out-of-date policies, including SW2, and our own local plan policy do support B use classes on allocated employment sites. Obviously, since the writing of those policies, we've had a new use classes order. That use classes order transfers what was historically B1, what some of us older planners might call B1 uses. They were transferred into a general E class. And on that basis, the application does propose E classes, but that's restricted down to those office uses, historically those B1 uses, for those of you that remember the old B1. And we can secure that via suitably worded conditions to ensure that the site is adequately used in accordance with our policies, the allocation policies, and that we avoid any conflict in terms of the viability and vitality of the town centre. And that could be the form of a suitably worded condition. So as set out in the principal section of the report, we consider this site to be in principle acceptable in this location in its entirety, both the full application and the outline planning permission. It meets the general aims of the MPPF, and also this is an allocated site, and therefore we consider it in accordance with SW2 and ECO3 of your own Breckland local plan. So on that basis, the principle of development is considered acceptable in this location. I've touched on the access to the site. That, as we've set out, is off Turbine Way. Apologies, I'm flicking. That is set out off Turbine Way in accordance with SW2. You'll note that the plans submitted show a temporary turning head and a formal turning head, which will be suitable for HDVs and will be provided in the outline part of the application. The temporary turning head does conflict with a pedestrian crossing, but obviously, as set out in your report, we have had conversations with the Highways Authority in that regard, and they consider that this conflict is acceptable on a temporary basis, subject to a condition to secure the final turning head in an alternative position. To avoid that conflict, you'll note from the officer report that obviously we have comments from the Highways Authority with regards to electrical charging points. You'll note from the officer report that the Highways Authority have expressed their disappointment with regards to the lack of electrical charging points at the outset of the application. We've obviously discussed that with the applicants, and the applicants have come back and said their individual providers have different requirements in terms of the level of EV charging points, and therefore they would like the ability to have those discussions and deliver them in line with those individual providers. We have discussed that with the Highways Authority, who are satisfied in that regard that we apply a condition, and therefore in the event planning permission was to be acceptable, then we could apply a condition to require details of EV charging points at a suitable point when the use is prior to first occupation of that use. And on that basis, the Highways Authority don't object. The outline part of the site will be dealt with largely through a reserved matters application with regards to obviously the layout, the appearance, the highways, and the Highways Authority are satisfied in that regard. Also, given the proximity to the A47, we've consulted our National Highways, old Highways England. Everyone's changing their titles, but that is now National Highways for anyone that wasn't aware, and they have no objection to the planning application either. One of the key issues with the site members, obviously, and you would have looked at your report, is the drainage of the application site. There have been significant conversations between the applicants, officers and the LLFA with regards to the drainage of this site and how it would adequately work for a major development in this location. You will note that the LLFA comments are set out in detail in the officer report. They're also summarised in the main sections of the report, but you'll note overall that the LLFA have an objection to the flood risk assessments and drainage strategy that have submitted through the application, and in regard that they don't reflect their best practice with regards to the application, and they wouldn't result in an acceptable drainage strategy overall for the development site. You'll note from the officer report that policy EMV09 of the Breckland local plan is very specific, and it does set out that all applications should reflect best practice and the lead local flood authority guidance, and any updated version of their guidance, providing appropriate information is required to assist in the determination of an application as issued by the LLFA. And also the MPPF is very specific in their reference to the requirement to consult and have regard to the LLFA's comments in determining a planning application. And in that regard, we have set out in the report and in the officer supplementary report members where those key concerns lie. So those key concerns lie around the drainage hierarchy, and I've discussed that in a bit more detail in the supplementary report for you, that how the strategy in front of us doesn't sit well with the required SUDS drainage hierarchy. In terms of drainage viability, the design principles and the best practice, the drainage design modelling, the exceedance of the drainage system and post-development flood risk, and water quality and drainage design are all key concerns from the lead local flood authority about this development. And overall, you'll note from the officer report that the LLFA object to this planning application in the absence of an acceptable flood risk assessment, drainage strategy and supporting information. Just for information, in the officer report, we have set out that there are no flood risk or drainage concerns that were raised in the allocation policy. And that we've also consulted the Environment Agency, and this is set out in a bit more detail in your supplementary, on the grounds that the proposed drainage strategy for the site is deep infiltration. That is infiltration over the depth, over 2 metres in depth. Apologies. And because it's deep infiltration, we also have to consult the Environment Agency. The Environment Agency raised no objections to the application with regards to deep infiltration. But again, I've explained this a bit more in the supplementary report, that deep infiltration isn't considered as infiltration in the sustainable drainage hierarchy, and therefore you first have to satisfy the SUDS hierarchy and look at what is sustainable drainage before you move on to deep infiltration, and for that to be acceptable in policy terms. Also, members, you'll note from the officer report that Anglian Water have been consulted and raised no objections to the application. However, there are significant concerns from the lead local authority that demonstrates that the proposal would not achieve an acceptable drainage strategy, and the applicants have failed to demonstrate that the site could adequately drain to not result in flood risk elsewhere, which is contrary to the guidance as set out into the MPPF and policy EMV09 of our Breckland local plan. And on that basis, that is the reason for refusal on this application, and that has been recommended in this regard. Members, I have put the drainage strategy plans on the screen for you. Obviously, we can get these back up if we've got some more questions about drainage, but essentially there is going to be a linear drain running across the centre of the site, and that's the blue line running across the site. There is going to be drainage capacity in the blue hatched areas, and then I don't think you can see them very well, but in these northern sections, water holding areas, and just down into this section here. But all in all, the overall drainage strategy isn't acceptable in terms of demonstrating to us there wouldn't be a resultant flood risk elsewhere. And on that basis, members, we have had to refuse planning permission, recommend refusal of planning permission. Just some more aspects of the report. I've covered the visual impact and the landscaping strategy. Just another matter that was raised by the tree officer, sorry this is so small, but a section of historic hedgerow does have to come out at the access, sorry, you don't need to see the section of hedgerow, you can't see it on that plan. But there is a requirement to remove a section of hedgerow at the access to the site to provide access to the site. Obviously we've consulted the tree officer in that regard. This is an allocated site, and the requirement in that allocation is to have access from this location. So it was the intention of that allocation that part of that hedgerow would be lost. And I've already set out to you previously that the applicants have agreed to some heavy set planting along that northern boundary in replacement, and the tree officer has no objection in that regard. And obviously if we were to grant planning permission, we would condition landscaping, and that would be assessed through the discharge of condition. You'll note from the officer report, members, that our ecologists have commented on the application, and submission information has been submitted to satisfy the ecology elements, but they recommend a condition that further updated surveys would be undertaken prior to commencement, because those surveys have become quite dated in the event planning permission was granted. That no condition is required for archaeology. The applicants throughout the course of the application have submitted sufficient information to demonstrate that there would be no impact on archaeology. And you'll also note from the noise and contamination section of the report that our environmental health team have no objections with regards to contamination, and have recommended that noise could be adequately dealt with by condition. Just showing you the remainder of the presentation, members. So just to show, it remains a grassed, previously farmed, open site, and in the distance there you can see the hedgerows which frame the majority of the boundaries of the application site. This is the southern boundary with the existing part of the Turbine Way, and then this is the access to the application site. So just finishing on the location plan, members. So obviously this is the location plan of the site. We have recommended this application for refusal on the base, taking into account the lead local flood authority's advice and the lack of an acceptable drainage strategy. And in the absence of an acceptable flood risk assessment, drainage strategy and supporting information, we have recommended this application for refusal. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Rebecca. Now, I've got Councillor Morton. Would you like to go first or last? You wish to go last, and Councillor Anscombe, you wish to be prior to Councillor Morton. Okay, that's fine. I've got Martin Cavalier. Are you speaking, sir, or here to hang on a sec. How much time would you like?
Are we 3 minutes between us?
Apparently, but I can be slightly flexible if need be. But
I'm the landowner.
yes. Would you like to go first, or would you like your agent to go first?
We have no agent here. This is the applicant. I'm the landowner.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, applicant, right.
Richard will be speaking far longer than I. I just want to give you a bit of background facts.
Okay. That's fine.
Do I have to do something?
You have to press the button, which looked like a little dot. Oh, you've got it. Well done. Carry on, sir.
Right. My name's Martin Cavalier. I bought this land along with other land in the town 12, 13 years ago. Just for context, we own everything on the inside of the A47 from this site round to the Norwich Road. The majority of that is owned by us. Next month you'll be, I believe, considering an application from Crocus on another part of our holding. In all the time that we've owned this particular site, it was allocated, of course, when we bought it. It was allocated now, I think, for about 20 years. In all that time, I've had various conversations, but the only people that were prepared to actually take the risk, spend money in Swaffham and build a speculative employment scheme are Padleys. If you refuse this, I suspect there will be another 20-year period during which the site will sit there growing grass and not much else. So I would encourage you to consider favourably this application. Over to Richard.
Firstly, I'd just like to start by thanking the Planning Committee for their time today. I'm a little bit frustrated. We were speaking regularly with the Breckland planning team today, and they didn't mention they're inviting 3 of the LLFA officers today. If I'd known, I would have brought my own consultant team, which may have informed any question and answers at the end. I'm incredibly disappointed to be here with a recommendation for refusal on drainage and flood risk grounds after spending almost 2 years on this scheme. The Breckland planning, estates team, LLFA and my team have failed to find a compromise on a drainage solution for the site. It's fair to say that we've struggled to see eye to eye with the LLFA since we first submitted planning. I've paid for many meetings with the LLFA on Teams and in person, and we still don't seem to agree on almost anything. This is the first scheme I've been involved in where we've been unable to agree a drainage strategy with a lead local flood authority. We've worked well with Breckland until recently, and since the beginning of September, we have a freedom of information request out with them, which we're mainly asking for all the correspondence relating to an independent drainage report, which was supposed to arbitrate between the lead local flood authority and our good selves. We believe the report was finalised in September, and we've still yet to see a copy. This is an allocated site in Flood Zone 1 in an area of no history or reputation of flooding. The Breckland planning team would not have allocated this site if they thought it was at serious risk of flooding. My team have produced a drainage strategy and flood risk assessment which we believe is in line with national and local policy. What we have not produced is a tropical paradise, which is what one of the LLFA officers asked us to create on a Teams call. We have no objections from the Environment Agency, Anglian Water or Ecology team. The comment regarding deep infiltration is we are at 2.1 metres and normal infiltration is at 2 metres. I repeat again, the Environment Agency have no issue and we're asking for some reasonableness. It is not a hard and fast rule on 2 metres in our consulting team's opinion. We are looking to build a deliverable, viable, light industrial scheme providing units for national occupiers as well as strong local businesses. We are also providing access to the Town Council Leisure Centre land and hopefully a second phase of development. If this scheme is refused today, we're going to be forced to appeal and go for costs. We have taken legal advice and further drainage advice since the Planning Committee report was produced, and we submitted this to the Planning Usher on Friday before the deadline to be made available to the Planning Committee members today. I hope you received a copy of the correspondence. The case law is clear that as an applicant, we do not have to provide the utopia of drainage schemes. However, we do have to provide one in line with national and local policy, which we believe strongly we have done. I would just like to conclude by thanking Councillors Anscombe and Morton for their support today and the continued support of the Town Council. I hope we can conclude today with a positive outcome for the benefit of the local community, economy and employment, which I'm sure we'd all like to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Anscombe, please. Just one moment.
Thank you, Chairman. When Paddy's first presented this scheme to Swaffham Town Council in 2022, it was welcomed as a strong economic benefit to our community and reflected the objectives for both the neighbourhood plan and local plan. Swaffham is a growing market town that has high levels of deprivation, low skills level, with few opportunities for employment, especially for young people. The Padley's proposal, being adjacent to the existing commercial businesses, would create new business opportunities with a mix of light industrial, storage or trade counter, and bring additional employment to the town. Consultees such as National Highways, Ecology, Anglian Water and the Environmental Agency have all reached positive conclusions for a site with a low flood risk. For nearly 2 years, there has been protracted negotiations with the local flood authority, but still no workable outcome. Swaffham Town Council states in their letter that they confirm their strong support of the application and that the application proposed will provide much needed employment in Swaffham to balance the extensive residential development occurring in and around the town. I support this application as Swaffham needs the benefits that this development would bring. We do not want to see this time wasted and opportunities for employment disappear.
Thank you, Chairman. The importance of this development to Swaffham's growth and prosperity can't be understated. Our town delivery plan identified that we had a smaller economy partly due to a constrained commercial property market, with by far the lowest amount of space out of the 5 market towns, in particular industrial units. This development is vital to addressing this gap, diversifying our local economy and allowing businesses to be established and expand. It will undoubtedly bring a significant number of new jobs, and this is particularly important given the current economic climate and the lack of local employment opportunities. I'd like to thank officers for their work through what I know has been a protracted process held up by one consultee. Notably, there's been no objection from other consultees. In particular, the Environment Agency has made no objections, including in relation to infiltration, which has formed part of the Flood Authority's objection, despite being within the EA's remit. I disagree with the recommendation to refuse this promising development, which is in flood zone 1 and at a very low risk of surface water flooding. No flooding concerns were raised when the site was vetted and allocated for the local plan. I know the applicant feels that certain best practice measures suggested by the FA, such as 100% rainwater recycling, are simply not practical for the site. Nevertheless, the applicant has set out plans which align with actual requirements and national guidance, including for rainfall exceedance, and they found engaging with the Flood Authority constructively very challenging. I'd urge the committee to consider the huge economic and social value this development can bring to our town and district. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. Carry on. Thank you. I'm okay.
Could I just clarify what the policy is?
Yes.
Yeah.
Please do. Clarification, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Can I just clarify for you members, or hopefully help you out, about what the policy framework in which you're considering the application with regards to drainage is? Because we've heard a lot about there's no flood risk on this site, or it's never flooded before. That isn't your consideration, unfortunately, in terms of policy terms. So just to be really clear for you members when considering the application, so the NPPF says when determining any planning applications, and this includes any major planning applications, which this is, local planning authorities should ensure that flood risk is not increased elsewhere. So that's your key. There's more detail in the NPF members, but you're ensuring that flood risk isn't increased elsewhere, not that you're not that the site hasn't flooded or there is no history of flooding. You mustn't increase flood risk elsewhere. And your own policy within the Breckland local plan requires similar, and also that you should take account of the LLFA guidance in reaching a decision on any application. But the key message is that you shouldn't increase flood risk elsewhere. That's the key policy consideration.
This is the job of a chairman. I'm going to hold the questions just for one moment. My officer just made a statement there which the applicant doesn't seem totally au fait with. Am I correct? Would you like to comment back?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'd just like to understand where are we causing this extra flood risk outside of our scheme?
Okay. 2 years in.
Yeah.
So members, your consideration when considering the application is ensuring that the development doesn't generate flood risk elsewhere. Your statutory consultee in this regard has told you that the information submitted as part of the planning application does not adequately demonstrate that there is an acceptable drainage strategy that would not generate flood risk elsewhere. That is your statutory consultee in this regard. We completely accept that the applicants worked really hard in trying to demonstrate a drainage strategy. We completely accept that they don't consider that their development would generate flood risk elsewhere. But your statutory consultee in this regard, members, is the lead local flood authority, and they are telling you that the information submitted is insufficient to demonstrate that the development has an acceptable drainage strategy. And in that regard, that we cannot satisfactorily say, it's my advice to you, obviously you can rebalance the argument in a different way, but without the information to show there's an adequate drainage strategy, members, we don't consider as officers that you can demonstrate that they wouldn't generate flood risk elsewhere.
Okay, this is like going to the theatre but expecting to see a play, and we're now about to see a musical, because instead of going to questions from members, which I will come to, I'm going to ask our solicitor who wishes to cover a few points off. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like, please, to ask the LLFA quite clearly and unequivocally to let committee know which of the following categories their objection falls into. And in particular, I am looking at the sentence in their consultation response, which says, quote, "We will not advocate flood risk assessments and drainage strategies that do not reflect best practice where there is, in our opinion, scope for better." So I ask, please, the LLFA, are you saying that there is scope for better, which, of course, in an ideal world we would like, but actually what is produced and before us by the applicant is satisfactory? Because it is not lawful for us to refuse on drainage grounds, flooding grounds, something purely because there could be a gold standard, as opposed to follow the analogy, a copper, a bronze. So category one of my question is this acceptable, but you would prefer better? Or are you saying this is unacceptable? This will not work. There is going to be flooding. Or 3, are you saying, despite all this time, we don't know. It is up to the applicant to show us, and they have failed to do so. Other than you being happy with the flooding, which we know that you're not, your objection has to fall within one of those 3 categories. Could you please tell us which one it is?
Okay, gentlemen, who's wishing to... right, you're going to step up. Mike, can you take
Oh,
the mic
sorry.
off? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Our overriding reason for the continued objections to this application... Sorry, I'll have this closer. Is that any better? Thank you. I'll start that one again if that's okay. The overriding reason for our continued objection to this application is insufficient evidence so that we can determine whether this application will increase flood risk. Yeah, okay. Apologies. I'll put it really closely and then start that again, okay? So the overriding reason for our continued objections for this application is insufficient evidence so that we cannot determine that this site will not increase flood risk. Hopefully that was clear.
Coming back, Mr. Horn.
So your stance is that despite all this time, despite all the meetings that have taken place, you are not actually in a position to be able to say either way whether this increases flood risk.
That's correct.
Thank you. Okay, to members.
Thank you very, very much. That makes it clear what your stance is, and our members can take it from there.
Okay, with that, it's open to questions from members. I've got Councillor Attwell, please.
Chairman, this is a bit of an unusual request, but would it be possible just to put the drainage drawing back up on the screen and for members to have 2 to 5 minutes to study that? Because we may, as a result of looking at that, have questions for these gentlemen and the applicant, and I think that would be a reasonable thing for us to do. I can't see the finer detail from this distance. Would that be acceptable, please?
Yes, by all means. Would you like the officer to be there to pinpoint things, or are you happy looking just at lines?
If the officer would like to do that and they think that that would be helpful, by all means.
Yeah. Are you wishing to stay seated or come up to the screen? Get to the screen. Yes, it is an unorthodox issue, but I'm prepared to allow it because I think we need to be in a position eventually to make decisions. So, Rebecca, if you'd like to use that screen, if members are having complications, if they'd just like to come up, I would like suspension of the meeting in respect of I would please like to retain some silence within the room so questions can be asked. Okay. Thank you. Yes, that was unusual to suspend that meeting. I apologise for everyone who's live streaming this, that you ended up with 3 or 4 minutes of nothing while we chatted down our front to our shirts. I assure you, on my position as chairman, that nothing underhanded took place, and no passing of brown envelopes, etc. happened. Not on my watch. Well, I don't care if I say it because I'm going to say it. So we're still open to questions from members. Councillor Atwell has spoken. I've got Councillor Kittle-Morris and then Councillor Bambridge. Thank you.
Chairman, there seems to be an impasse between what the developer and the agent are saying and what the local lead flood authority is saying. My question is to local lead flood authority: do they consider that the applicant or stroke agent could come up with a scheme which is acceptable to them, and would they work with the agent? I mean, I think the application, as the two district council members have said, is quite important to Swatham's economy, to get this application through and passed, so that the onward water doesn't flow into somewhere else and flood it, if you see what I mean.
Are you prepared to answer, gentlemen?
Yes, is that on? Yeah, that's brilliant. We do believe that there could be a viable scheme for this site. However, what we have been presented with at the moment is not sufficient. I think it's important for me to mention that there is another option at this site as well if this scheme could not be designed to a sufficient standard, which is a sewer in the road. We spoke earlier on about the drainage hierarchy, or Becky did, and that has not been explored. It's something that could be a viable option, but that is for the applicant to explore with their engineer.
Are you talking there about a combined sewer?
I do not believe it is a combined sewer. I believe it is a surface water sewer, but that would have to be explored further.
Councillor Bambridge, please.
Thank you. May I ask the applicant a question first? There hasn't been any expression of any manner in which you're taking water off the site. Is that correct?
Could you put your mic on, please? I do apologise.
Apologies, Mr. Chairman. We believe we're doing infiltration, which means it all will drain through the ground. So we don't believe that water needs to be taken off site. That's the difference between sewers and what we're saying.
No, I appreciate that, and I think this is a difficult one for us to pronounce on, certainly to pronounce in your favour, I have to say, because we have had large problems in Breckland and in Norfolk generally with flooding, which has been caused by building work, and I know I don't always agree with the LLFA on things, but on this occasion, I do think they've got it right. You have a site before us, and admittedly we're looking at half the site at the moment, and we can only decide on half the site, but we have the other half of the site, which is likely to be presented to us at some stage, and I seriously doubt that your plans for this half of the site will actually work. I don't think your filtration will be good enough, and it certainly won't work, I think, when you have the other half of the site coming up. So we're preparing, and I'm going to get cut off in a minute, I know, we're preparing for problems in the future. I do think, I mean, there is a gold standard with drainage, and that's where does the water flow into the sea or into the aquifer, which can do with the water under where you're at. But that's the gold standard, which you could go for, but you haven't, but that would be very expensive. I don't think...
I've cut you off, Councillor. Mr Horne's wishing to come in.
To be clear, committee, we are not legally entitled to demand a gold standard. That is not the test, and it would be unlawful for us if we refuse this because you conclude that there is not the provision of a gold standard. What you have to determine is whether what has been provided is satisfactory, that it meets the requirement of our policies, and if not, how much it doesn't, and then you put that in the melting pot with other material planning considerations. What you have been told this morning is that the LLFA are not objecting because there isn't a gold standard, nor are they objecting because they are saying that what is provided is unsatisfactory. What they are saying is they don't know at the moment.
Mike, please.
Before I mentioned gold standard, I believe I said that I did not believe that what they were proposing was satisfactory for this application. You can check if you like, and I apologise if I'm wrong, but I think that's what I said. I then said as a word of advice to the client that there is a gold standard if they choose to go for it. But I think this could be done better.
Thank you.
Again, it is not the judgment that needs to be made whether it can be done better. That is not the question. The question is it satisfactory?
Rebecca, please.
Can I just clarify with members the application type, because I'm just worried I might have misread you or something. But so the application type is for a hybrid application. So you've got a full detailed element where you're considering everything, and then an outline element. You're considering both halves right now. And also usually with an outline application, we'd have a full and robust drainage strategy with that as well. So the drainage strategy is for the whole site. What we looked at was the details. On the full side, there is a drainage strategy for the outline side, which is set out in the officer report. The LFA have concerns with that outline drainage strategy as well. But just to be really clear, you've got to consider the outline and the full today together. We will obviously get a reserve matters in the event application was approved later for the outline, but you have to consider both halves today, not just the full bit. So I'm sorry if I misled you all.
I've got Councillor Attawell coming back again, and then Councillor Kittle-Morris, please.
Two things, Chairman. The first one is the applicant made mention of an independent drainage report and a freedom of information request that hasn't been fulfilled. Where is this drainage report, and can members see it, and does that shed any more light on the situation? Because I think that may be important if that's been done as part of a discussion between the two parties. So could I have an answer on that first, and then I'll raise my second.
Mr. Wood.
My understanding, Councillor, and it is just an understanding, that we are processing that freedom of information, sorry, it's an EIR request, and I don't have any precise details as to exactly where it's up to.
Okay.
Just come back on that point. That hasn't really answered my question. Does the independent drainage report exist? If it does, can members see it, please? Because clearly the applicant hasn't been provided with a copy, despite putting that request in. He said September.
Early December.
So we may be at the point where you're reaching the critical time where you have to give them a response, and not yet. But that may have a bearing on the decision that we as members make today. And without seeing that report, we cannot say one way or the other. My second question, if I may, Chairman, relates to what has been said about gold standards. And I think it's fair to say that the lead local flood authority cannot say with any certainty. What you're saying is you don't know whether this is going to work or not. You are not sitting here telling me definitively, sorry, Councillor, this just will not work, there will be flooding. this is a very much you don't know because you don't think you've got sufficient information. Having said that, why, if you're saying that, but I've got the Environment Agency who are saying that they've looked at it and they haven't got any objections, that they haven't raised any concerns with this. And I think that significant weight needs to be placed on what the Environment Agency say in this regard. Can I have a comment on that, please?
Response, gentlemen.
Yeah, so on the second point about the Environment Agency are a statutory consultee, but their remit in this regard is in terms of the proposal to directly infiltrate into ground which is more than 2 metres below the surface, which making it deep infiltration. So their remit is literally to comment on the deep infiltration, and that is along the grounds of water quality. What the LLFA are looking at in the drainage proposals is a sustainable drainage system on the whole. So it's flood risk, it's the sustainable systems, the drainage hierarchy, so infiltration, is there a watercourse nearby, is there a sewer nearby, and then we get towards the deep infiltration proposals. So there are other potential alternatives. So that is what the LLFA are commenting on.
But the Environment Agency aren't saying that they think there's a problem with the infiltration, are they? You've just said that one of the criteria that they're considering is the infiltration through the chalk layer, I assume. So they haven't raised any concern about that, and this drainage system hinges on whether that water can infiltrate through that layer. Would that be a correct assessment? You said in your comments that the Environment Agency look at the filtration, basically through the deep layer filtration through the chalk layer as one of their criteria. This drainage system hinges on the fact of whether that water will drain away through that layer, and they haven't raised any concerns regarding that. You've said that is one of their key criteria that they assess it on, but they haven't raised any concern about the ability for that water to infiltrate through that layer. Would that be a correct assessment?
Is that on? Yeah. So yeah, the response letters that the LLFA have provided do cover that quite greatly. So obviously, as my colleague just said, the EA within their scope of works, that is part of their criteria that they are consulted on, which is the deep infiltration aspect, and they've obviously provided their stance on this application. As an LLFA, we look at the, as well as flood risk from multiple sources, we look at the surface water drainage strategy that is presented for the application, and we have recognised obviously that the site is deep infiltration, and that is something that we have to raise, that's something we have to practice, although the Environment Agency do have that overarching strategic role over groundwater pollution as a whole. Yes, the infiltration rates, as I mentioned earlier on, feasible, but to make the strategy viable, they have to be applied correctly into the surface water drainage strategy, which is one of the points that we have objected on, which is the drainage design model.
Could I have a response about the independent drainage report, please?
Yes, that was just what I was clarifying with the chairman. I wanted to come back on that. So we commissioned the independent drainage report, and I say we, Breckland, commissioned the independent drainage report in, I think it was August, September of last year, because we had received a long letter consultation response from the LLFA, which failed to reach any conclusions in terms of whether they objected or not objected, and that's a matter of fact, and you can see that by reading the LLFA consultation responses. We decided that it was worthwhile potentially getting an independent drainage consultant to try and unlock and move this impasse forward. In reflection, I'm not sure that the document achieved that. It was fairly even-handed in terms of the approach that it took, and as a result of that, we allowed or gave the details to the applicant, and they spoke separately to those independent consultants. The point I would make is that response was based on earlier iterations of the drainage scheme and not the scheme that you have in front of you today, and it was the direct response to that earlier consultation. There has since been the consultation response from the 21st of December, which is the most material in terms of your consideration today, members. If you wish to see it, that's a decision for you to make. It's not in front of you today. My view is that it's not material in terms of moving any of these issues forward. It was an attempt by the council to act almost as an honest broker between the LLFA and the applicant to understand the issues.
I'll take Councillor Kittle-Morris, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. In answer to my question to the LFA, I've got teeth in today. They responded to my question in that they considered there was a scheme that would go forward or could be put forward by the applicant that would alleviate the impasse that we're in at the moment. Could I make a recommendation that we defer this application for further talks between the LLFA and the applicant to try and come to some agreement as to what actually a strategy that the applicant can put in place and the LLFA will actually approve?
Okay, I'm glad you said that. Yeah, I look that we have a red flag for refusal, we have a green flag for approval. I'm looking out on the battlefield and all I can see are orange flags, and I can't decide which team I want to kick for, battle for, or go out and kill someone about. So I fully agree with Councillor Kittle-Morris, and following on from his, and I will second it myself from the chair, that we are in a position where I can't accept that any member in this room will be able to make a definitive decision on this application. So I'm putting forward, and I would like a vote on it, please, that I want to say suspend, but not suspend. We defer this application for further investigation within the item of drainage. Yes, Councillor Wilkinson.
I can hear what's been said, Chairman, but at the end of the day, we've just heard that there have been 2 years of discussions and nobody's coming to an agreement. There is a drainage strategy in place, and I believe the lead flood authority need to prove that that strategy will not work. Simple as that.
That's fine, but my position here at the moment is that members are the ones who are going to make the final decision, and I personally feel that not all the members in this room are in that position to make that decision. And declaring an interest in the fact that I use Waitrose to shop in, amongst other shops that I go to, and I do not want to go to Waitrose with Wellington boots on so I can get my fruit and veg. Or the possibility of.
You don't now.
I know I don't know. You know where I'm going with this. We put it forward, and I had a member that I've seconded.
We need to know what needs to be asked. Is there a way forward? Will extra discussions, pave the way?
And who are you putting that question to?
And the applicant.
Well,
can they come together?
Maybe. Wants to say something, but I don't know if you want to know that.
Yes, please, Rebecca, help me.
Oh, sorry, I said the landowner wanted to say something. I don't know.
Oh, he does. Oh, sorry.
I said I didn't know.
Yes, I'll take it.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for your time again. With respect, I think we've all spent 2 years on this scheme. I really would prefer a definitive today, please, on this, so I feel we can actually move forward. You know, we've had lots of meetings, and Breckland have tried to referee it. We've had an independent drainage report, and we've still, in 2 years, been unable to agree on a drainage solution. So I really would very much prefer that there would be no deferment. I should say that we did try to go non-determination pre-Christmas on this, and for a technicality we were unable to do so. So we would very much like to have a definitive of where we're going after this meeting rather than a deferment, please.
Well, I had it put forward from the floor for a deferment, and I've seconded it from the chair. So if we take that, that'll be as far as this committee is concerned. And if we don't have that agreement to defer, then we will continue with the meeting in the respect of the fact that enough members will be able to make the decision on this application that they can vote correctly one way or the other. So could I have a show of hands for deferment, please? That's myself and Councillor Kittle-Morris. 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, I think, Councillor Banbridge. 7.
Let's do it again,
Yeah.
please.
Can we just do it again and hands up, please?
Nigel's got his hand up behind you, Julie.
Yeah. And those against, please? Councillor Atwell and Councillor Wilson. Okay, this item is deferred. I'm not arguing about drainage or anything else. I just don't feel the members are in a position to make that final decision. And I do apologise to the applicant and I apologise to the local lead flood authority, but I don't want us to not be fully equipped to make that final decision. So this item is deferred. Thank you very much.
Chairman, could I just make a quick statement? I think this piece of land has been vacant since I was a member in 2007, behind the windmill and all the rest of the thing. And it's something which I think Swaffham needs, but I think we need to get this flood thing properly sorted so that the application can go ahead.
I don't think any member would disagree with your statement. Thank you. Okay, thank you, gentlemen and ladies and what have you. Are we all right to continue, or does anyone want a comfort break? Are we all right to continue? What's that mean?
Break.
Yes? Okay.
Comfort break.
Right, we're going to have a comfort break. 5 minutes, please. Back here just after 11:30, if you don't mind, of which I must carry on then with Banham.
That's good because it lets the
Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Like I say, I do apologise for that first application. It did get a little expanded all over the place, but we're going to move swiftly on. And our next item is 9B at Banham, 3PL 2022-0972F. And my speakers are Nick Moyes, who's the agent, James Bunn, who's the applicant, Louisa Wade, who's the flooding consultant, and Matt Hare, who's the drainage engineer, and Councillor Stephen Askew. So if you'd like to all come and take your positions.
How come we've got so many for them? Agent applicant, flooding, but they managed to bring a flooding consultant.
Okay. Okay, over to you then, please, Barbara.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members. So here we have application in Banham, land south of Kenninghall Road, for the erection of 43 dwellings and a community office space, together with associated access, landscaping and infrastructure. And members, you will have received an additional representation sent by an objector. That was sent to members individually. So this is the site in question. You can see Kenninghall Road to the north and Wash Lane to the east. And you can see here that the site is situated within the settlement boundary of Banham, just to the south of the settlement. There was actually a previous planning permission on this site for the same number of dwellings, which has now expired. This is the site in the context of surrounding development. You can see there's development surrounding the site on three sides, with a field to the west, and further west is Banham Zoo. So this is the proposed layout for the development. You can see it has a central access road coming from Kenninghall Road and a frontage development facing Kenninghall Road. It has a central open space together with a further small area of open space to the southeast, with footpath link onto Wash Lane, which is a public right-of-way. Dwellings are placed with surveillance of the public open space and to the perimeters of the site, mainly due to the constraints that are on the site, which restrict where development can go. So I have some pictures here just to put the site in context. So on the left, the site is on the left-hand side. This is looking west. The picture on the right is looking in the other direction, so the site is to the right of the picture. Again, this is looking along Kenninghall Road. The site is on the left. And again, this is a picture from Wash Lane, where there's the adjoining property to the south. This is standing within the site. So the picture on the left is standing near the site frontage, looking along the site frontage. And you can see looking west as well. That's a picture of the western boundary of the site on the left, and then the eastern boundary of the site. So back to the site plan, so we can see the open space. The application has provided sufficient open space and a children's play area to the centre. This does comply with policy ENV4 of the local plan. Although there's no outdoor sport provision, you'll see from my report that this has not been made because the policy does recognise that this will be looked at on a site-by-site basis, and on this occasion, given the scale of development and the constraints of the site, this was not considered to be necessary. Housing mix, there's a good mix of housing, and that's set out in the report. It provides for a mix of two-storey and single-storey units, and also a range of property sizes from 1, 2, 3 and 4-bed homes, with 11 properties for affordable housing provision, which equates to 25% required by our local plan policy. The provision of the community office space is in the centre of the site. I don't know if I can point out. Just there. and that's considered to be a benefit of the scheme. It will provide it's a single-storey building which will provide a service space for residents to conduct home working and meetings, and it has its own parking provision. So house designs, I have a selection of house designs just to give you a flavour. So that's a selection of some of the house designs. The scale, design and materials are considered acceptable. The community office space is 5.6 metres in height and 10 by 10 metres square. That's the community office space. Designs, as you can see, are traditional simple building form with a mix of black and red pantiles and red multi-bricks. I also have some street scene images. So the top image is looking looking at the front of the site from Kenninghall Road. The bottom image is the properties situated along the eastern boundary. The top image is the centre of the site fronting the main access road, and the bottom slide is the properties which run along the rear of the site. So the site frontage will remain open and landscaped, with open space and suds features extending along the road with views into the site, into the open space and play area. Single-storey properties are proposed at the site frontage and adjoining the neighbouring properties to the east and south. This will serve to lessen the visual impact of the development off-site and to the existing residents, as well as the fact that the vast majority of the existing landscape features will be retained. Overall, the development is in keeping with the character of the area and has had due regard to site context. In terms of residential amenity, this has been considered. There are acceptable garden sizes and depths and spacing between dwellings, such that there's no unacceptable relationships with, between dwellings or with existing dwellings. Noise and dust aspects during construction has been considered, and that can be controlled by condition through a construction management plan. And furthermore, consideration has been given to the impacts of the community office building, as the use of the building will be restricted. Turning now to highways, access parking. This plan just shows the off-site highway works proposed, and obviously that's set out in the report. So the proposed is for a 2-metre footpath along the site frontage with crossovers and locations of bus stops to be finalised with county highways, and that would be agreed by condition. So each property has 2 parking spaces, and there are 6 visitor spaces, as well as 6 spaces for the office building. Highways are obviously now happy with on-site and off-site highway works. Flood risk and drainage aspects, if we go back to the site plan. So the proposal is for an attenuation basin in the centre of the site where water will infiltrate into ground. And following lengthy discussions with the Flood Authority, who initially objected, they are now content with this proposal. And you see in the office report, it's acknowledged that there has been flooding to properties in Wash Lane. The Flood Authority are obviously aware of this and originally objected, but following extensive work and following the applicant undertook additional overland surface flood modelling on the site. And following this work, the Flood Authority are now satisfied that the drainage scheme is acceptable in preventing flooding on-site and will not lead to increased flood risk off-site. In addition to that, the applicant has rerun the flood model since the recent flood event in October to ensure that the scheme can cope with the levels experienced during that recent flood. And again, this has proved acceptable to the Flood Authority. And you'll also note that the applicant proposes to provide betterment by way of an off-site financial contribution for flood defences towards to help the Wash Lane properties, and this is again considered to be a benefit of the scheme. Therefore, the issues of flood risk and drainage are considered to be satisfactorily dealt with. In terms of ecology, various surveys have been carried out, and these are considered acceptable by the Council's ecologists, subject to conditions, together with confirmation of the applicant's intent to join the district-level licensing scheme to indicate any impacts to the development on great crested newts has been fully addressed. The site has trees and hedges along all boundaries, which will be largely retained, and a comprehensive landscaping scheme is proposed. And again, this is considered acceptable by the tree officer and complies with policy. So overall, the proposal accords with the development plan and other material considerations. The proposal also offers additional benefits to the community in the form of the community office space and the contributions being made to the wider flood mitigation measures affecting properties in Wash Lane to provide a betterment for existing residents. Thank you, Chairman. I'm recommending approval, subject to Section 106 agreement.
Thank you. Councillor Askew, in your position as ward member, would you like to go first or last? Thank you. And in your, you are down here today to speak on behalf of an objector and on behalf of the parish council. Would you like to go first on that?
Happy to do that first, yes.
Okay.
Before you start the clock on me,
Yes.
could I,
That's already started.
could I just point out that I'm trying to compress 2 3-minute statements into 3 minutes. So if I slightly go over the time, I'll do
Yes, we have had a discussion. I will allow you a bit of flexibility on that, but I don't want my members to go to sleep.
Can you ask Councillor Askew that the neighbour he's speaking on behalf of sent some photos in? Does he want us to show them while he's talking?
Do you, Verity Spencer sent some photos. Do you want us to show them while you're talking?
That would be very useful.
Okay, if we just get them up before you start. Sorry, members, it's just that the objector and the parish council were meant to come, but one of them's been actually held up by having to go with that connection with the police force, and the other one can't make it today. Councillor Attewell.
Chairman, would we normally, we would allow 3 minutes for a parish council and 3 minutes for an objector, would we not? So therefore, Councillor Askew would normally have 6 minutes to avail us of...
He would do, but I've asked him to keep it brief so that we can get it, because what happens is when we, as you know very well, when you have a speaker, they will tell you, which is how I said to Mr. Councillor Askew, they will tell you about the floor, the ceiling and the walls, and the next person will tell you about the floor, the ceiling and the walls, but add the fact that there's also a window. And then the third one will tell you about the floor, the ceiling, the walls and the window, but tell you there's a door. I mean, if you want to sit through 3 minutes, followed by 3 minutes, followed by 3 minutes, then you tell me now and I will...
Chairman, I think in fairness to the residents and the parish council who want to be heard on this application, I'm quite happy to sit here and listen if it takes 6 minutes. We would normally do that if those representatives turned up anyway. So I think we should allow it in fairness to those residents who are absent.
We don't normally. This is why they're not present. And it's a tricky situation. I understand where you're going, and I don't really want to fully discuss it. But if you really want to make a point of it today, you do. That's fine. I'm not going to argue. I was doing it for the benefit of all members. If all members are quite happy. Councillor Askew, are you able to do, have you got your separate readings?
I've got them here, yes, I've done lots of scribbling and stuff to try and adjust it, but I'm more than happy to go through it all.
Okay.
Providing people aren't
I'm happy. I just tried to, obviously the day's gone completely haywire today, so go on then. Who are you going to speak for first?
the parish council, if you don't mind.
Okay. Fine, I'll give you 3 minutes on parish.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. The Parish Council wish to bring to the attention of the Planning Committee some points for consideration before a decision is made. We appreciate that housing allocations have to be met with regard to the local plan allocation, but we are concerned that some key points may have been overlooked. Although the application has been given over as recommended for approval, I would ask you to consider the following points. In the past 2 years, 26 properties have been refused as they would bring overdevelopment in this immediate area. only a matter of a few hundred metres from this proposed development, so why is this development being considered if you have already considered the area overdeveloped? 2. Sewage and wastewater from the development will be processed through a pumping station very close by. These pumps repeatedly fail and are overwhelmed on a regular basis with existing loads and is always breaking down in times of heavy rain. It actually pumps out sewage into adjacent watercourses which overflow. This pumping station is at the centre of a major area of flooding in the village, and our concerns are obvious. It goes on to say, we have to mention the obvious, which is common to many of our rural villages, about the school being over capacity and the doctor's surgery, of course. We ask you to realistically appraise these points before following the recommendations, particularly to the proven document evidence relating to the problem of sewage pumping and why you should approve this large development over a smaller adjacent development for the reason of being overdevelopment. That's Parish Council. Thank you. Moving on to Objector, who's asked me to speak on her behalf. She says, as I hope you'll be aware, there have been several flood events now in the last few months in the area of Wash Lane adjacent to this site. The report for the Planning Committee acknowledged the flooding on the 20th of October, but there has been further flooding on the 2nd of November 23, the 2nd of January 24, and the 4th and 5th of January 24, all of which penetrated properties. As an aside, our engineering consultants carried out flood risk assessments on the development on London Road in Attleborough, and I'm sure you are all well aware of the extensive flooding issues that have been suffered by residents in the vicinity of that development. So as you can all imagine, we are not convinced by the surveys and modelling work carried out, particularly in this vicinity. Anglian Water have stated, paragraph 7.5, that foul water drainage is proposed to the main sewer, and they have stated that there is capacity for the development, but we know this is incorrect because Anglian Water engineers have explained that although the pumps work, they cannot cope with the volume anymore and it needs increasing in size to cope with the demand. A number of residents have since also received a rebate on their Anglian Water bills, with Anglian Water stating that we're sorry to hear about your flooding. This payment is our way of saying sorry, and is this not indicative that they are aware of the issues with their sewage system? So this does not solve the issue going forward, together with the influx of water that will be coming from the development on Kenninghall Road. They feel that it's quite clear that this development is likely to go ahead, so what they're seeking to achieve is the developers to work with all the agencies together and not passing the buck to who's responsible for what. And because Breckland have a duty to protect its residents and safeguard their homes, which includes being put at further risk of flooding. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. 3 minutes and 18. So not too bad, was it? We wouldn't have gone wrong anyway. Okay, we will move swiftly on. We've got Nick Moyes, who's the agent. 3 minutes for you. Especially because I know who you are.
Thank you, Chairman. I won't dwell too much on the planning aspects, the general planning aspects, because they've been covered very well, I think, by the planning officer's presentation. But needless to just say that, as you've seen, the sites within the settlement boundaries had planning permission previously, most recently in 2019, and so the principle clearly of development here is acceptable. The scheme, again, as you've heard, would deliver a number of community benefits, 11 affordable units, which are in line with recommendations from the housing officer in terms of size and mix, and would be well integrated with the open market housing on the site. Public open space, again, in excess of policy requirements, and financial contributions to local education and library services and to the local flood authority for wider mitigation works. Again, you've heard a good housing mix, both in terms of size and single-storey and two-storey. The density at 17 dwellings to the hectare is relatively low, but appropriate, I think, for this village location. In terms of transport matters, You've heard that the Highway Authority no longer object to the application. It's been designed to meet normal standards in terms of road design, visibility and parking provision. You saw that there is a new footway proposed along the site frontage, which would include space for a new bus stop, together with crossing points over Kenning Hall Road. We don't believe it's necessary to extend the footway any further because, again, as you saw, there's a direct connection to Wash Lane from the site. And in terms of road widening, we think that would provide only a very marginal benefit and could introduce complications in terms of engineering and additional cost with very little benefit. It could also have the effect of increasing vehicle speed, which is a concern of the Parish Council. In terms of flooding, the applicant is very conscious of this issue, being aware of local concerns and the history of flooding in the area, particularly along Wash Lane, as you've seen from those photographs. Considerable work has been done to assess the flood risk both on the site and off-site, and flood modelling work has been done to assist with that, and I have colleagues here who were involved in the design of the drainage scheme and the flood modelling who can answer members' questions if they have any on those technical aspects. But needless to say, the drainage scheme that's put forward is very much in line with SUD's principles, so it's based on the infiltration basin together with swales and filter drains and permeable paving. All of that, we believe, and as shown by the technical reports, means that there will not be any worsening of existing problems on Wash Lane. It won't solve those problems, but it won't make them any worse, which is clearly the key test here. In terms of foul drainage, we do clearly have conflicting information from local residents and Anglian Water. Anglian Water raising no objections to the application, and our consultants have asked them again directly in the last week to confirm that there are no issues, which they've done. We believe there are technical solutions if members are concerned about foul drainage, which could be dealt with by condition. So on that basis, we hope members will be able to support the recommendation.
Thank you. It's open to questions from members. Councillor Clark and then Councillor Kybird.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a question for our officer, Barbara. Reading the application.
Sorry, I do. I'm going to hold to it. I do apologise because we had Councillor Askew at the beginning. And I forgot he's got to come back as Councillor Askew. No, I do apologise.
That's all right.
Thank you. 3 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, so members, you have heard the issues affecting residents adjacent to this application site. Events of biblical proportions, which one might expect to see once or twice in a lifetime, I'm afraid are happening with worrying frequency, and we are seeing properties succumbing to flood and the devastation that it brings with it. Leaving aside the issue of the sheer volume of new housing engulfing Banham in recent years and other associated infrastructure pressures that come with it, this particular application is very sensitive, as it's crucial that all aspects are thoroughly investigated and implemented to ensure that the site itself and the network of properties adjacent aren't impacted on. The frustrating part of this process is that the major problem of sewerage and drainage capacity, which is already insufficient and a major cause of flooding incidents due to systems failure, will be battered back by planning officers as not our problem. It's unfortunate that members were denied some video footage which was sent off, but hopefully members may have seen it with via email attachment. Members, the clue is in the name, Wash Lane. Historically a natural flood area, more senior residents of Banham can recall a time when it was all wet meadows there. With the benefit of hindsight, it was probably unwise to have built houses in the vicinity in more recent times, and has been borne out. Lessons must be learned, and I urge members to satisfy not only themselves but also the local community that all aspects of flood management via infrastructure will be implemented prior to any bricks being laid. The devastation of a flooded home experienced by residents in recent years mustn't be simply dismissed as not our problem, and I hope this council will apply the necessary conditions it has within its arsenal to ensure the protection the existing and proposed houses need, should members choose to approve this application. Members, at the end of the day, I would suggest you are likely to approve the officer recommendation, and what I wholeheartedly request is that this council works alongside the LFA, developers, Bannon Parish Council and local residents to ensure that sufficient utility capacity, particularly the sewerage in this case, is in place. There is no vehicular, and also ensure that there is no vehicular access to the development via Wash Lane, and to ensure there is no added flooding impact on existing or new properties as a result of this development. Because it's a hell of a task to defy gravity, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now it's open to questions from members, which I've had Councillor Clark and then Councillor Kybird.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Just a question for our Officer Barbara. Reading through the application, particularly around the Norfolk County highways, they refer both to walkways in the site. They also talk about widening of the road frontage. I don't know if that's on-site or off-site, but I may have missed it. And they say subject to conditions, but I couldn't see anything. I may have missed it in the long list of conditions there, referring to the road frontage and widening. If you could clarify that, thank you.
Yes, Councillor. All of the conditions that highways have asked for are indeed in the report, and I'm suggesting those. The only one that isn't is highways are asking for a 6-metre widening of the road all the way along the site frontage. Now, you'll see in the report why I believe that's not necessary to make this development acceptable. The road is largely 6 metres, and indeed more than 6 metres. The difference is 0.4 metres in places along the frontage, and the highway operates successfully at the present time. And secondly, when the previous application was considered, highways didn't ask for that widening then. And I also consider that widening the road could in fact allow vehicles to travel faster, which is a concern of the residents. Thank you. Yeah.
Councillor Kybird, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Under the obligations on page 30, it mentions a financial contribution towards off-site flood mitigation. That doesn't appear to be in the conditions, and we don't know how much it is and what the effect's going to be.
Yes, that matter will be secured through the Section 106 legal agreement. That will be one of the matters secured under that. The work that will be undertaken is work that the Flood Authority are in the process of planning and putting in place to alleviate the flood risk upstream from Wash Lane. And they're trying to get capital funding to do that work in the next financial year.
Councillor Attawell, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I just get some clarity on Anglian Water? Is the problem with Anglian Water, perceived problem from residents, that the pumping station can't cope because the pumps aren't big enough for the foul drainage, or is it a case of the surface water basically floods the pumping station and then the pumps just get overwhelmed and shut down, creating a bigger problem? And I'm just wondering, can we condition something in here to request Anglian Water, because I'm concerned that these pumps may be undersized for the additional capacity that's required for the foul drain. They say in there that there's capacity with the Swaffham Water Recycling Centre, which is the catchment area, which is Swaffham's, that's what it says in there, quite away from Bannon. So should say, but says Swaffham Water Recycling Centre in what I've got. No? Okay. My point is, those pumps, I think we need to be satisfied that that pumping station and the capacity of the pumps in that pumping station can do the job which is required. I don't think that work's been done. The fact that Anglian Water hierarchy are just saying everything's fine, no problem, we've got capacity, we can, I'm sure, request that those pumps are specifically looked at with regard to whether they need to be upgraded. So it might be the pipework's got the capacity, but the pump's ability to move the stuff going through the pipe can't. And I'm just, can we condition something on there that work is done just to satisfy ourselves?
So what Anglian Water's saying is I'm looking at, sorry, so I'm not doubting it does say that in the report, but I'm looking at the Anglian Water Service comments in the representation section, in the consultation section. But what they're saying, there's capacity at the old Buckingham Water Recycling Centre to take the water. So that's what they're saying. Then the developer will have an arrangement with Anglian Water where they will pay monies, where Anglian Water is then required to move that water from there to the capacity at the Water Cycling Centre. So in answer to your question, unless Anglian Water are asking for a condition for the developer to do more works to that system, then no, it wouldn't be reasonable to have a condition, because it will be Anglian Water's statutory duty under the statutory regulations to make that connection work in principle. So unfortunately, no, it would not be really reasonable for us to request a condition for the developer to do works to the Anglian Water network, because under Anglian Water network regulations, they will have to pay them to do those works through that agreement, which is outside the Planning Act.
Councillor Bambridge, please.
Thank you, Chairman. My comment is surprisingly similar. I agree with what the officer has just said about the statutory requirement of Anglia Water, but we seem to have a conflict in the information that's been brought before us. According to the report, Anglia Water is saying that the Old Buckingham Water Recycling Centre is at capacity, and yet we're having information fed to us from members of the public in that area that the on-site engineer, whatever that means, and I agree it might have all sorts of means, say that it is incapable, and I think that's a question that we probably ought to ask.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Bambridge. I think, it's a really important distinction here, members, that we completely accept that there may be existing situation here, where there's an existing situation with the with the foul network, apologies. You can only look at the proposed development. You cannot look at the existing situation and any existing issues that exist currently. Obviously, we have the greatest sympathy with the existing situation, and as a council, we proactively work through your group and through other groups to ensure that these things don't happen for existing residents. But what you need to be looking at, members, is the proposal in front of you. Will it function in terms of the foul network and also the surface water drainage network, ecology, and all those other material considerations? Your statutory consultees in this regard are saying yes, it will.
Okay, thank you. No further questions from members. Oh, there is. Yeah, Councillor Plummer, then Councillor Kiddle. Oh, Councillor Kiddle-Morris, then Councillor Plummer.
Just a quick question. I mean, when I was very young, a long time ago.
Can you remember that far back?
No, I can't. It's I was deeply involved in laying sewers and with a theodolite and a dumpy level and all the rest of it, and the capacity of the pumping station was based on the output per household in number of gallons per day. Now, I presume that Anglian Water will look at each house and say each house is going to produce so much into our sewer, and therefore the capacity of our water treatment works is fine. My question is, they cannot, or can they take into account the surface water that gets into their sewer, because most of those connections are not legal, and is their assessment solely based on the output of foul sewerage from those dwellings?
I can't tell you how Anglian Water assess the capacity of the network. But what I can tell you is how you are required to assess a planning application. So you yourselves, and I'm not disputing what you've just told me, are not required to be technical experts in how the capacity of the drainage network works, or as per the previous application, of technical knowledge on how the systems work. What you are required to do is take into consideration the advice of your statutory consultees, which is a material planning consideration in the determination of this planning application. And unless you have categorical evidence from a technical advisor that disputes that the statutory advice that you've been given is incorrect, then you must take those statutory comments into consideration in the determination of that application. You can obviously, within your remit, disagree with the balancing exercise that we have given those statutory comments, so you can give them less weight. But what you cannot do is ignore them. They are material planning considerations. And unfortunately, or not unfortunately, but the facts of this application is that we have no statutory objections in terms of drainage, in terms of foul drainage, in terms of capacity to this application. I do accept that there is issues in Banham, and I'm sure other places that have been mentioned, with the foul drainage network, but you can only consider this application and those material considerations that relate to it.
I would just remind members that if there is a question that they would like directed towards the applicant, we have got Louisa Wade, who's a flooding consultant, here for questions, and also Matt Hare, who is a drainage engineer. So if anyone through this would like to direct a question to them, first of all, I have Councillor Plummer, then I'll go back to Councillor Atwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm now going to give you a technical answer to some of these questions. I've got to explain this to a parish council tomorrow night, so I've looked deep into it. The capacity of angling water for the sewer is houses, how much they can pump with the houses. The problem is that you can all do it yourself when you look along the roads. All their manhole covers are open to the elements. They have to be to let gases out. So what happens is when you get flood water, the pumping stations become flooded out. The water pours down these, floods the sewer system, the pumps can't cope, they cut out, and then we get the problems. So logically, it's a very old, established technical problem that our sewer systems are not sealed, so surface water can enter them, and the amount of water we get off the fields and roads now floods the system. So just a quick little thank you.
Rebecca?
Taking you back to this site, that is the site you're considering. So your lead local authority have considered the drainage strategy for this site, which infiltrates on this site and goes directly to the watercourse. So basically, your key consideration with an application is does the surface water wipe its own face on this site? And that's a real technical term, that one. And the LLFA have agreed that the drainage strategy put forward by the application does wipe its own face in terms of dealing with surface water. I 100% appreciate what lots of you are telling me, that there's an issue with surface water getting into the drainage system which is affecting the capacity of the plant. But you can only look at the situation on this site. So I guess a simple way of putting it is this site adding to that surface water drainage, which is creating the capacity issues that you're telling me about a drainage network? And I'm saying very simply that you're telling me about. So what you need to consider in your assessment of this application is, will this application make that situation any worse? And your statutory consultees are telling you no.
Councillor Atwell.
I suppose my question is for the drainage people is simple. If I refer you to that glass of water, if I keep filling that with that jug, eventually that's going to overspill, unless either I've got a bigger vessel to put the water into, or something else got to happen to make sure I don't cause a problem here and the usher rushes across with cloths, etc. The foul sewer, angling water, so what we're basically saying is nobody's done any work to actually ascertain that there's a capacity issue. All we've got is somebody sitting at a desk at angling water telling us, yeah, everything's good, we've got no issues down on that site, the foul sewer can cope. That's basically what we've got. Do we have any technical detail? Have you got any technical information from angling water regarding the sizes of the pumps, etc., down on that site? How are we going to make sure that the container I've got is not going to be overwhelmed, i.e. that drainage system?
Okay, over to you, sir.
So the you're looking at it from the foul perspective and also the surface water. So currently you probably would get sheet runoff from that field because it's just a field that when it becomes saturated, that water is running off and probably getting into that foul system. So we're now producing a drainage system that's now going to capture like the roof water and the road water. That will then be contained into a basin, swales and filter drains and permeable paving, which will hold that water and infiltrate it into the ground. So you are lessening that surface water that can get into that foul system. In terms of the foul drainage and the capacity, Anglian Water do obviously their desk-based exercise to look at the capacity into it, but when you fully go into the adoption application, they'll then look at capacity and upgrade works that they need to do to take the sewerage. So anything that they would do would be increasing the sizes of the pipes that connect into their drainage system or adding in some control valves within our drainage site that would then release the flow into it. So they're looking at the wider capacity of the foul system and they can deal with it from our development, but the detail of how that connects into it is their responsibility to upgrade via contribution from the developer. But there is an argument that our roof water is now being captured. That wasn't there before, so we are hardening up the ground, but we're also adding a lot of storage in many sort of cubic metres of surface water storage that would be held back rather than it going to Wash Lane, which it currently does.
Thank you. I think that's also highlighted by the fact that Councillor Clark's just taken some of your water, so that will reduce your intake. Councillor Plummer.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to just make it clear to the planning officer, I wasn't criticising or trying to say about this site. I'm talking about all sewer systems across Norfolk. Please don't think I was criticising this. I was just giving you a technical detail rather than the site itself. Thank you.
She's all right. She won't take a contract out on you. Anyone else? Any other members wishing to speak? No. Thank you very much. Okay. So on this item at Banham 3PL 2022-0972, and this is a full application, your officer's recommendation is one of approval. Could I have a show of hands, please? That's unanimous. Okay, this item is approved. Thank you. Moving swiftly on, Councillor Askew can stay where he is. As soon as we shift out our dignitaries for this application, we will have in Philip Cowan, who's the agent, Richard Kidd, who's the applicant, and Robin Laird, who's a supporter. So that's at Rocklands 3PL 2023-0985, and that is a full application at Rocklands. Okay. All nice and comfy. Good. Over to you then, please, Matthew, when you get a moment.
Good afternoon, councillors. So this is a full planning application at Rocklands, and this is the Donkery on Sandy Lane, and this is for the conversion of a single-storey annex building to provide a separate self-contained independent dwelling, and it will comprise of 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, dining room, living area, associated parking and amenity space. Okay, so here we've got the site plans. As you can see, you've got the site here in red. So the site here is here in red. The building here is already pre-existing, and that is the existing annex, and it's ancillary, so it's tied to Stafford's Farm at this current moment. And then the parking is proposed for here with the access, and then the amenity space is proposed here. And then this is just the site in its wider context. So as you can see, you've got the site here in red, and then you've got, this is Sandy Lane here. Okay, so here are the proposed elevations. Here is the proposed floor plan. So it's already set out the parking area and the amenity space. And then as you can see, this is the proposed floor plan for the for the building. So the annex part as existing is here, and then this is existing storage area, and this is what is proposed to be, and then this entire building is proposed to be changed from an annex to an independent dwelling. And then these are just the proposed section plans. So before I go back to the site photos, I'm just going to run through the application itself in detail. So the application has been recommended for refusal by planning officers. There was a previous application that was not brought to planning committee and that was refused. So planning officers are recommending two main reasons for refusal, but there are three set out in your report. So the two main material considerations that officers will be that the reasons for refusal are on principal development and also design appearance and amenity. So the first, going through the principal development. So as has been set out already, the building is pre-existing, and I'll just bring a picture of it up now. Okay, so this is the building from the outside. So as part of the local plan, policy HAU 12 does permit for the conversion of buildings, including to residential use where they are situated in the open countryside. So the building is outside of the defined settlement boundary of Rocklands, which is a village with boundaries, and there are exception policies that do permit for new residential use within the open countryside. So officers have assessed this against policy HAU 12, and they don't, and as officers, we don't feel that this is the correct policy to be assessing the principal development. So in the supporting statement, so paragraph 3.90 of the local plan states, this policy relates to the reuse and replacement of non-residential buildings in the countryside, such as barns and agricultural buildings. So as so the existing use of the building is an annex, which is a residential use, and that is as it is an ancillary outbuilding to an existing residential property. So for this reason, we feel that this is the first part why HAU 12 is not relevant as part of the assessment of the principal development. And then furthermore, policy HAU 12 does state the reuse of existing buildings in the countryside for residential purposes will be permitted where the commercial use of the building has been shown not to be viable. So a commercial statement was submitted by the agent on behalf of the applicant, and they did set out why they consider it not to be considered as acceptable for commercial use. So some of the things that they stated were that the local area has poor broadband connectivity, which would reduce an opportunity to attract businesses, including such as office use, and also they also considered that there's not it would not be considered appropriate for retail use as it's unviable given the lack of parking provisions and also the internal space requirements for the building. However, officers have considered that they have not considered the holiday let aspect for the building, and as this has not been explored, we also consider that they have not fully explored all of the commercial uses for the building. The next thing to set out, so in terms of principal development, as officers do not feel that it's compliant nor also fits within the realms of what is considered as accessible under policy HAU 12, officers have taken the decision to assess the principal development for new residential dwellings, so the change of use under policy HAU 4 of the Breckland local plan. So this is assessing new residential development outside of the defined settlement boundaries of village with boundaries. So when assessing it against policy HAU 4, officers considered this to be not acceptable given that the building is roughly 1.5 kilometres away from the defined settlement boundaries of Rockland, and the first part is that of HAU 4 is that developments have to be immediately adjacent. Also, furthermore, village with boundaries are not expected to exceed a 5% housing target. So Rocklands was given a target of 12 dwellings during the local plan period, and it can be demonstrated that 24 have either been completed, allocated, or permitted. And so for this reason, this represents a 15% increase in housing within the parish of Rocklands, and this is above the 5% housing target. Okay, so that's the first one. The second one, just going back to the site plan. So the second one that we've got concern is regarding design and amenity. So the building is already pre-existing, and this is obviously the main dwelling here. However, officers have got concerns that if this was to be a change of use from an annex, which is acceptable given it is an outbuilding and ancillary to an independent dwelling, we have concerns with the relationships of the two as two independent units. We do consider that there is a limited, that there's a very close proximity between the two dwellings, and for that reason, we are recommending refusal on a Crown form of development for a new residential dwelling. And just to have some pictures just to help demonstrate the concern. So this is the building from Sandy Lane looking towards the building. And then just a close-up just to show just some of the details, just to show that the building does hold aesthetic value. This is looking at the building. So you're just a bit further, I think, east, you've got the access to Stafford's Farm, and this is just looking at it from Sandy Lane. So as you can see, this is Stafford's Farm itself. This is Sandy Lane, this is the existing building. This is just to demonstrate the concerns that officers have regarding the close proximity if this was to become an independent dwelling. And officers also do have concerns regarding overlooking into the proposed private amenity area. So this is where it is proposed if this were to be permitted as a new dwelling, and we've got concerns with first floor windows from Stafford's Farm having direct eye line, direct view above the private amenity space. This is just looking into Stafford's Farm, and again, just demonstrating the close proximity. And then this is looking at it from the west going east, and then as you can see, this is where the proposed parking area is, and this is the access from Sandy Lane. Okay, so the application has been recommended for refusal on principle of development, design, appearance, and also amenity. Yeah, and just to confirm that the regarding nutrient neutrality, it's outside of the catchment area, and also a unilateral undertaking and required fees have been submitted. So therefore, the matters of GI-RAMS is considered as acceptable, and there's also been no objection raised by County Council Highways as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Askew, I know you're the neighbouring ward rep, but would you like to go first or last? Last, that's fine. So we've got Robin Laird, please, who's a supporter. 3 minutes, sir.
Hello, thank you very much. I will be very brief. We moved to the area 2 years ago, and we were struck immediately with the Stafford's Farm. We walk along the road with our dogs, how beautifully maintained it is, how Mr. and Mrs. Kidd look after their land, and how everything they do is considered and thoughtful, and how much they care about their own land and the surroundings as well. So in terms of how they intend to use the property, that's entirely down to them. But anything that I thought it'd be helpful that from a personal point of view, as it's a personal application, that I trust Mr. and Mrs. Kidd's judgment, and I can't speak for other neighbours, but for myself, I trust their judgment, and the application causes no concern for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Cowan, please. Sorry. I've got Mr. Philip Cowan. Thank you.
Apologies for the schizophrenic meeting, members. Thank you very much, Chairman. I feel we're splitting hairs, if I'm quite honest, in terms of what is residential and what isn't residential. This particular building itself was partly converted to provide an annex for family members of Mr. and Mrs. Kidd. And unfortunately, due to various conditions that they suffer from, those children were not able to move into this particular building as a consequence. So half of this barn that you've seen before you has already been converted to what is effectively half of a house, or if you want, it actually is a small house on its own right. And as an annex, it provided access from the farmyard, the old farmyard of Stafford's Farm, into the building. We were asked to look at how to improve the particular building to provide an independent dwelling, ideally for actually Mr. and Mrs. Kidd and one of their children in the fullness of time. This is a classic problem that people find in Breckland, that they live in very large houses with significant land, and over time the house becomes too big, becomes a bit of a millstone around their neck, but they don't want to move out of the community. And this particular building exists. And as a consequence, it seemed logical that as half of it had already been extended, altered and provided for part residential, that the rest could follow suit. I accept the fact that it's on a tight site, but, you know, it's one of typical farm buildings and farm communities and farmsteads that we have in this part of the world. So we felt it was not inappropriate to look at a small dwelling, and this is a small dwelling. It's essentially 2 bedrooms. But in terms of amenity space, to be honest, it all faces south. It doesn't look back at the farm. The only bit of the farm that has potential overlooking is over a garden space with a tree in it, and that's the bit that Matthew showed you to the east of the development. But the rest of the amenity space of this particular dwelling, which extends to about 270 square metres of amenity space for a small building, is completely private. And we've ensured that that happens by actually constructing 2 walls, which are showed on the application plan, to actually define the boundary of this particular property and create its own integrity. I struggle to understand sometimes why we won't allow development in our rural communities like this. Rocklands is a significantly large parish, and to say it's 1.5 kilometres from the settlement boundary, well, you know, there's an awful lot of other properties that have been converted which are equally distant from the settlement boundary in that particular village and other villages in Breckland. So I believe we've created a very good design which meets the need of the applicant. It meets the need, frankly, of an awful lot of other people should they wish to move into this place in Breckland. It retains an existing building, it gives it a new lease of life and provides an opportunity for the family to continue to live in that area for the fullness of time. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Askew, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, looking at this application, I find it difficult to logically understand what the problem is here. On the one hand, the building already exists and has consent as an annex. It makes total sense to convert the remaining building, which lends itself for development, to make full use of its potential and to retain the historical aspect. The design is sympathetic to the other properties by effectively turning its back on them. Paragraph 3.2 acknowledges that potential overlooking is addressed by blocking of existing windows, and the location is sound, south-facing, walled and independent with its own access. Parish Council have no objection, highways have no objection, and there are no other local objections on the portal. It's as uncontroversial as they come. It just seems to me that something's just trying to be hung on it to enable a refusal to a perfectly sensible development. Some members will know that I have always been an advocate for sensitive development in rural villages, and here is one which totally fits the bill. And it just seems a little bit churlish for the department to recommend refusal by suggesting that there is first floor overlooking and the situation is cramped. I suggest that the only overlooking is what's been outlined by Mr. Cowan and the rooftop of the adjacent building, which is the case for thousands of houses throughout the district and beyond. And if you want to see cramped development, then come and visit Banham in my ward, where they're packing in the estates, and I'll show you cramped. I know of several instances in my ward where blatant overlooking instances have been overlooked, no pun intended, so it's very frustrating that an issue is being made of a non-issue. The agent has outlined the applicant's circumstances with aplomb, and I've stated before that councils are here to help people. To refuse this application does nothing to improve the situation of the relevant parties, nor does it improve matters for the district. This is an existing barn and ripe for conversion. Converting to a residential property ensures preservation of its visual and historic value for future generations, will fit the current needs of the applicant and enhance their well-being, and in years to come provide a good home for others who choose to live there. So, members, I ask you to do the logical and sensible thing by approving this application, of which the district is in need of smaller properties of 2 3 bedrooms. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, yes, go on, fire away. He did say cramped, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Obviously, members, we're not in the grounds of looking for something to hang a refusal off of. We look at the planning policies, what they say, and we have to, your principal starting point in determining planning application is your planning policies and the content within them, and they are our adopted planning policies as the local planning authority. The officers set out in detail what those adopted planning policies say. They are facts of what the actual planning policies say. Of course, members, it's completely within your remit to take into account other material considerations or rebalance the contents of those policies in another way. So Councillor Askew has pointed out that this is an historic building that's worthy of preservation. We don't doubt that. It's completely within your remit, members, to balance policies and apply to the planning balance other policies and take those into consideration. So if you feel that there are merits of this building that outweigh the conflict with policy, and there is conflict with policy HOW 12 and policy HOW 4, policy HOW 12 and HOW 4, based on the wording of those policies, you can of course consider other material considerations in the determination of this planning application.
Thank you. Open to questions from members. Councillor Kybird.
Thank you, Chairman. This has been described under HOU 12 as an existing residential development and under HOU 4 as a new residential development, but it cannot logically be both.
So I think the confusion lies in is what is the use class of an annex? The use class of an annex is C3, but it's not a standalone unit in its own right. It's an ancillary building and it's conditioned as such. So the annex and the residential building is one unit. The farm and the annex is one residential unit and it is conditioned as such. They are not 2 individual units, so not 2 individual C3 units. So with regard to policy HOW 04, you're creating a new residential unit and therefore that conflicts with policy HOW 4 because A, you need to have an immediate relationship with the settlement boundary, which this does not have, and secondly, you shouldn't exceed the housing target, which we're saying the housing target has been significantly exceeded by doubling the amount of houses in Rocklands. With regards to policy HOW 12, HOW 12 is specifically targeted at buildings that are not residential buildings, not in a residential use. So you're creating 2 planning units under HOW 4, under HOW 12. HOW 12, the policy, the whole aspect of the policy is not for considering conversion from C3 to C3. And that's what we've set out to you there.
Councillor Bambridge.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, I think the case for this application that's been put forward by the local member and indeed by the applicant are considerable. We had in the presentation that there were alternative uses that this property could be put to, and they had been investigated and found wanting for various reasons. We apparently have no objection to it becoming a holiday home, and a holiday home is residential by any other description, I would suggest. I tend to be influenced in my interpretation of a policy, and I make no criticism of officers for bringing it to the committee because it does indeed stand against some areas of our policy. But I think on this case, the grey area that says we should accept it outweighs the grey area that says we shouldn't.
Okay, thank you.
But there we are.
Anyone else wishing to speak? Councillor Wilkinson.
Yeah, I'm a little confused. Can I ask the applicant, does he live in that big farmhouse and is he going to move into this for health reasons? And then what would he do with that house?
Now you can speak. Yes, we currently live in the farmhouse.
it has got too big for us. You know, we're not getting any younger, and as people do, we want to downsize, and we've got that there, which seems a logical step. We've got the donkeys in the fields around us, and we want to keep that.
Councillor Wilkinson asked what's happening with the farmhouse.
What will happen with the farmhouse?
Well, obviously we'd sell it, we wouldn't. Yeah.
Okay, that's your question answered. Any other questions at all? No? Good. So with regards to this item at Rocklands, 3PL 2023-0985 in full format, your officer's recommendation is one of refusal. Could I have a show of hands, please? 1. And those against? Okay. And abstentions? 1. Oh, 2. Sorry, I do apologise. Okay. Could I have from the floor your reasons for going against the officer's recommendation? Someone to speak, please. Councillor Bambridge.
Right. I see no. If we would present this as a suitable case for an annex and indeed for holiday accommodation, I think that it is also suitable for housing. I think we'd be very unwise if we quoted doubling the new houses in a village as a reason for refusing it.
Your planning policy tells you that you shouldn't significantly exceed the 5% and development needs to be immediately adjacent. I think we're not saying a holiday let's acceptable, we're saying it hasn't been investigated. Policy How 12 does allow for the conversion of buildings, but not residential buildings, and it is in a residential use class. So those are the facts of your policies, which you have to consider in reaching a decision. But what you can do is say that other material considerations weigh in favour of the development, which outweigh the conflict with policy. So what I may suggest to you is that you accept that there is a conflict with your housing policies, and that you suggest to me what those other material considerations, taking into account what you've heard around the room today, would be that would outweigh that conflict with policy that would make a residential dwelling acceptable in this location. You also need to address, I am helping, I hope, you also need to address the conflict in terms of the cramped form of development. And you can obviously say you disagree that the resultant design would leave it in a cramped form of development. But ultimately, when you give reasons for overturning a planning officer, you need to give your reasons that address those reasons for refusal, essentially.
In terms of modern development, it is in no way cramped. Try visiting any town in Breckland.
Okay.
And the other material. Oh.
Sorry, Councillor Bambridge.
Well, I think what you are allowing is a local person to remain in the locality by moving into a property that they already own, it being converted to housing.
Your other material considerations need to be material considerations. So I've heard today that this is an historic building, it's aesthetically attractive, that this would preserve that building. Those are material considerations that you would like to consider. I I've also heard that the resultant development would lead to the loss of that building, which is aesthetically pleasing. Those are the kind of things I've heard. I'm not suggesting they are your other material considerations, but I think, unfortunately, keeping a resident in the local area, although that is very important to you, and I get that and I understand why you'd want to do that, isn't a material planning consideration. So I'm not saying that's not important to you, I'm just saying that's not a material planning consideration.
Microphone, please.
Can I?
Yes, Mr. Horn, help them.
Can I wash up? Whilst you recognise the breaches of policy as regards HAU 4 and HAU 12, you consider that there are other material planning considerations, most notably the historic interest in the building, maintaining the building for residential use, that outweighs those breaches, and you do not consider that it is cramped. How's about that?
Okay, we've had a bit of ironing done. So, in respect of this application, sorry, who put that forward? That's Councillor Banbridge, I believe.
I did.
No, you put that bit forward. Do I have a seconder for taking? Yeah, do I have a seconder for that, please? Oh, you're going to vote for what no one wants to second it. Oh, thank you, Councillor Kybird. So, from the floor then, your recommendation is that we approve this item. So could I have a show of hands for approval, please?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Gone up now.
8. Right, we've gone up to 8. That's fine. 8 for and against.
1.
1 and abstentions. 1 still. Okay. That's fine. Okay, thank you. This item is approved. Thank you very much. Well done, guys. Okay, two final bits to do.
No, I've got to do reception.
Oh no, that's what I said. 2 final bits to do.
Sorry.
No, not 2 and then the other 2.
I thought you meant the last 2.
No. So we've got in Thetford, we've got 3PL 2023-0909 LB, a listed building, and 3PL 2023-0908, and that's a full application. And we have got Sandra Govender to speak, or not? Oh yes, we have. Oh yes, we have. Come and sit here, Come and sit here, please.
Bless you.
We need you sitting close so we can throw things at you.
I seem to be the only one, so.
No, you're okay. That's fine. Okay, and over to you, please, Rebecca.
Thank you, Chairman. So these are 2 planning applications, a full application for the erection of railings, 1.8 metres in height, and we've obviously got some images to show you, and a listed building consent to do, the railings above an existing brick wall, apologies, and a listed building consent for internal alterations to a listed building. The 2 separate planning applications, will present them together and you will need to make 2 votes. So this is the application site outlined in red for you, with the blue being the additional land in the ownership of the applicant. The most important part to note of this, for this application, members, is the use of the unit is already approved. You are not considering a change of use of the unit, you are only considering the erection of the railings and the internal alterations to the listed building, which are very minor in nature. And when we go through the application, you'll see that there is very limited historic significance in the internal aspects of the buildings, so the works, the internal works wouldn't harm the significance of the listed building due to the very limited historic features within the internal aspects of the building. So we're in Thetford, we're in the settlement boundary. This is the aerial view of the application site in question. This is the site plan that was submitted with the application. So this dark black line that's running round is the position of the proposed brick wall with railings. And then there are very minor alterations to the internal aspects of the building. And you can see from the application that given the use of the site, the applicant wishes to make this a secure area for external play for the future students or existing students. You can see that the proposed railings to be used around that external section shown on the black line just over here on the plan, and then also you'll note from the application that there is intention to install these safety bars to ensure safe and future use of the premise for the use that's already approved for it. And then this is the proposed ground floor plan, and there are you can see the darker lines, which are where these darker, where the alterations here, are proposed to the listed building. They are very minor alterations. The historic building officer has been involved in both the internal alterations in terms of changing the internal layout, the creation of different classrooms and office space, and to create some safer spaces, so the building is more permeable for the people that are using, but safer spaces for the pupils going forward. The Historic Buildings Office has also been consulted about the railings and the brick wall and their impact on the setting of the listed building, and in their view there'll be no harm to the significance of the building from the proposed works, either internally, those bars on the windows, or the external works surrounding the building. And again, you can just see the arrows there. They're just minor alterations to existing internal walling, which is all studs, new modern walling, to make the space more usable and safe to use for its users, and the installation of that office area, etc. And finally, the mezzanine floor. And again, those picture of the windows. So here are the internal photos of the building. I feel a bit unjust saying this, but they do show that there has been modern conversion of this building already, and therefore there are few architectural and historic features in the internal elements of the building. And this basically displays that those internal works alterations have already taken place, and that's the basis for our assessment there's no harm. And again, some more internal photos. This is the big hall space, showing that internal space and that those works of modernisation have taken place. Now we're looking at better using those spaces safely. Apologies. You can see the majority of the significance lies in the external elevations of this building from these photos. That is where the significance lies. But given the height of those brick wall and railings, 1.8 metres, given their position, given that they're railings, so they are permeable, so you can see through them, and given that they frame an existing space and make it safer, usable for the use that's already permitted, we don't believe that they would harm the setting either of the conservation area, this listed building, or its significance. And here's just some photos that we've taken of that green space that will obviously wrap around, wrap around from this brick wall and carry round into this green space. And again, just some more photos of that space. And this is just the wider context of the area. Oh, and some more wider context of the area. So you'll note from the officer report that there have been some concerns raised throughout the course of the application, including from the Highways Authority and 3 of the local residents, and the Town Council have made comments in that regard as well. The majority of those concerns are raised around the highways. So as you can see, it is on a corner plot. Apologies. It is on there's a better photo. It is on a corner plot. There are double yellow lines. There is obviously on-street parking in the locale. So you'll note the comments of the Highways Authority, the Town Council, and those 3 neighbouring residents are worried about more cars using this area and this site. This is covered, obviously, in the officer report in the highway section. However, I would reiterate, as I started, This is not an application for a change of use of the building. It already has that designated use. It's not an application to intensify that use. It is purely to make the building safer for the users that already use the space through those internal alterations and the erection of railings. And on that basis, we are not considering, they're not material, the concerns with regards to the impact on the highways, although we accept the current situation. However, this is an existing use that wouldn't have the erection of railings and those internal alterations wouldn't result in increased car usage to and from the site to an unacceptable degree to warrant refusal of planning permission. And on that basis, members, we have recommended this one for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Sandra Govender is here for questions if anyone wishes to ask them at any time, but it's now open to questions from members. You wish to ask members at all? No? Councillor Plummer.
You're on. You're on.
Am I still on? Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could we have a picture of the Rylands, please?
Railings are railings, aren't they? Got barbed wire around the top of them. Kids in.
No, I'll give you something to do. Now, are we happy that they have? Are we happy that they have arrows on the top of them?
Yes.
Because children love to climb over railings.
Not that high. They're 1.8 metres.
Well, when I get hitch up from somebody else, they can. I'm only just asking the question. I'm not.
They're not.
I think it's more from the outside in than the inside out.
That's fine. Thank you.
Oh, seriously, do you want to ask the applicant?
Yes.
I'm sure they've risk assessed.
Yes.
Like,
Would you like to answer?
I'd love to respond.
Oh, please do.
Thank you for that question. That was one of the things we took into account when we designed it. We had to match the railings that were found on 2 properties on that street. But if you looked at that railing a bit more carefully, there is a rounded top on the finial. So if you're right, a 1.8 metre child in a few years' time may want to jump the 1.8 metre fence, it would be safe, so we've risk assessed it. And because it's 1.8 metres, they will have other reinforcements to that fence. So, if children, there is a little ball on the top.
Okay, any other questions at all? Are we all happy to go? Right. Oh, please do, yes, if you wish.
Because Thetford is the way it is and parking is such a demand, we've already consulted around parking. So we don't want to add too many cars on Raymond Street. Nearby, Thetford's amazing in terms of free parking around the area. I didn't realize how many free parking spaces there are. But there's a Pike Lane parking where my families, remember it's a selective school. So I have 50% that come from Thetford, most come from Breckland, but then I have 3 taxis at the moment, and I did say 6 taxis, which will fit into those areas we spotted. But all my parents have already trialled parking in the Pike Lane parking and walking their child down, which takes to a maximum of 5 minutes, so up until we reach them. So we will, as a school, as the CEO of the trust, my priority is to limit the amount of cars that will ever be around that Raymond Street, and not to impinge on the double yellow line parking.
Thank you very much. There we go, free parking in Breckland. Councillor Brindle.
Thank you, Chairman. Just for the sake of those who aren't very familiar with the area, I walk past it several times each week. I know the road pretty well, and the location is such that what I can hear, I don't want to hear. I don't want to be railings there, but I absolutely take it that they are helpful and necessary, and that it enables a building that is difficult to find a use for to continue to thrive in the use it's got. So I would encourage colleagues to feel that the railings are, at the very worst, a necessary evil. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to take 2. Oh, sorry, Councillor Wilkins.
being as the railings was mentioned, being as that's a conservation area and the buildings protected, or forget the word, those railings will enhance that building rather than a mesh fencing or something which would have never been allowed. So I think that's perfect.
Yes, thank you. So 2 votes on this, please. I do apologise, but 3PL 2023-0909 LB, which is your listed building consent. Could I have a show of hands for approval, please? It's unanimous, thank you. And 3PL 2023-0908, that's a full application with regards to the other various alterations. Your officer's recommendation is one of approval. Could I have a show of hands, please? That again is unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. So we have item 10, which is applications determined by the Deputy Chief Executive, for your information. And item 11, appeals summary for January, which is there also for your information. Councillor Clark.
Just briefly, Chairman, not in connection with an application, just to mention that today's planning committee is the last time that Councillor Brindle will be serving on it, as he's regrettably standing down for this committee. He won't be at full council on Thursday when a replacement for him will be announced, and I just personally would like to pay tribute and thanks to his service on this committee since 2017. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Always a great advocate of anything that happens in and around Thetford. Definitely a strong voice for Thetford in the past, and then his involvement with other issues throughout the district. So we thank him for all his time as a member of this committee. Thank you very much, Mike. Councillor Brindle. Okay, guys, with that, I'm going to close this meeting, and that's it. Thank you. Goodbye.